Hello, everybody. Welcome to the panel. Welcome to the panel, and I'd like to welcome you to this afternoon's panel, and I'd like to introduce you to everybody on the panel. There we go, like magic. So we have a great collection of people here today, and I wanted to start off by them introducing one by one, telling you a little bit about themselves and what they've been doing since basically COVID began and lockdown began in their respective countries. So start with Meg, please.
I'm a manager at Entertainment One. I have a wide range of genre of artists that I work with, and I'm also the president of the MMF Canada and the chair of Factor, which is our largest funding body in Canada for music companies. So the last 100 days have been spent primarily with a lot of advocacy and conversations on how to get emergency funds to those that are in the most need, which obviously is our live sector, our management, our artist communities. And luckily from a cycle of where the artists are at that I'm working with, they were all kind of in the recording phase. So trying to figure out how to get recordings done when you're a band in quarantine versus a single hip hop artist is very different. So it's been interesting to see across the genres how this situation is affecting each artist differently.
Thank you very much. Yeah, you're lucky. You've got an artist off cycle. I have one on cycle. Per, over to you. Tell us your story.
Per, you're on mute.
Also, not on mute now, right? So I run a Swedish management company called Varsity Music. We've been ongoing since 2003. Managed today around 5 artists. Also running an orchestra project together with producer Jacob Hellner, Rammstein producer Jacob Hellner, that we hope to launch next year. I'm the chairman for MMF Sweden and for EMMA, European Music Manager Alliance, which is an organization that covers the UK, France, Holland, Poland, Norway, Finland, and Sweden. The last 100 days have been quite mad, of course. It's been rescheduling tours to start with to September, to then have to move them again into next year. We had a tour starting on the 19th of March. On the 12th of March, we got the notice that Germany was closing down, and we moved it in 2 days into September. That seems very unlikely now that tour can happen. So we're now moving it into May. So those sort of things been ongoing, refinancing the company, having a lot of talks with through EMMA and MMF Sweden with the government office about grants and how they're what type of grants they will get out to the live industry. Have a lot of dialogue with other industry bodies like Swedish Live and with the art council in Sweden, who actually hands out the money to promoters and management and agencies. So yeah, that's a brief summary.
Thank you very much. I think we'll come back to the point about, you were talking about the financing of the company. And I think that's a major issue for all managers and people in the live industries, particularly in these current circumstances. Kaiya, over to you, please.
Hi, everybody. My name is Kaiya Milan. I run a UK-based management company called Off Balance. I manage an orchestra and live band called Steamdown, and another artist called Afronaut Zoo, and Steamdown's founder and announcer as well, as a solo artist. Over the last, I guess, 100 days, it's been a bit different. So the way that Steamdown operates is that we do a weekly live event every Wednesday in London, and so the halt on the live industry has obviously been quite detrimental to that. But I guess the positive thing as well is that we were in the recording process for our EP and album, so that's positive. We're still able to do that. But yeah, live has completely stopped for us, and looking at additional funding to help support that, especially with our weekly night as well, and obviously just being involved in conversations and making sure that once live does resurface eventually, that we can kind of get our ducks in a row as well.
Thank you very much. Marc, over to you.
Cool. Hi, I'm Marc Thomas. I work in the Red Light London office. I work in the electronic department. Yeah, so it's been slightly different in electronic music. We work a lot more. We are always on. Everyone's always touring, and especially the client side I look after. My roster is very much global touring 24/7. So the last 100 days has been very interesting. A lot of it has been, like Piers said, we were in this mass reschedule phase, and now we've gone to cancelling and rescheduling next year. One of my agents at Paradigm said it's like rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic, which I thought was quite fitting. We kind of moved everything so much in those first month and then realised we don't know what's going on. Yeah, and outside of that, it's been good. We've had to pivot and lean and look at lots of other ways to generate money, live stream. We run record labels for our clients. We have certain clients in major deals where they are writing albums. A lot of stuff can be single by single basis. So we're still very busy. But yeah, we have been heavily hit on the live front, and we are constantly trying to figure out how we move forward.
Thanks, everybody. I like the comparison with a Titanic, Marc. Definitely feels like that sometimes. So I wanted to come back on one point. So you've touched upon live shows with your artists and rearranging them and stuff, but does anybody want to talk in more detail about how this whole process has gone on, and also the points about when do you feel, or when does the advice you're being given tell you that this live, in inverted commas, will resurface, and when it will start again in some form? Does, what does the landscape look like for the end of 20 into 21 for each of you with your relevant acts and the advice you've been given?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to jump in there. October is the earliest I'm working with. Say if I've got 6 DJs on my roster, we would have been fully booked till the end of the year and into next year. Pretty much everything's fallen out. We have reschedules in for September. And a lot of my acts they're from all over the world, but, a lot of our live business is in North America, and that's going state by state. So we have some reschedules that are in for September in Texas. Now, Texas is open. Florida's open. We have offers accepted for 2 artists for Florida in October, but I've accepted them with the caveat of we'll reassess 28 days out. I've just had I can't say what the festival is yet because I haven't re-announced, but we have a huge festival in North America, one of the leading ones that does over 400,000 people in a weekend. They're going to be live in October. And I'm now trying to balance, if I've got one of my artists is in Los Angeles, he can drive down to Vegas, so we can kind of commit to that and make a call on it. Another one of my clients who's on the same festival, he's based in London. So there already poses a thing of, would he be able to get into the country? Probably. What's the quarantine situation? He's going to have to front money. We're going to have to front money for flights, accommodation to Vegas. Now, if that festival gets pulled 5 days out, how are we insured? How do we even get our money back so we don't lose money from trying to stand by our commitment? So it's a tricky time. But yeah, as a marker, October seems as when things may, September, October, May. But again, it's state by state, and this is all depending on whether there's another spike. So I suppose that's where I'm at the moment.
Thanks, Marc. Does anyone else want to come in?
I can. We're looking at September 21 for new tours. We don't think it's possible that we're gonna. If we announce a new tour, we feel that people aren't really ready to buy tickets at this point. So hopefully festivals are back on track next year, and then new tours from September and onwards next year. We have a sold out the tour I talked about before, which was due in March. That was more or less sold out already. That one we're moving to May as those tickets are sold, and we don't need people to take to commit to buy new tickets. Had a US tour, a 2 month long US tour that was going to start in September. That one is going to be moved at least a year ahead, maybe a year and a half forward from the perspective of the US agents.
Are you guys worried about having visas to get into that country because of the way that they're giving such a short timeline of when they're closing, keeping the borders closed?
Yeah. Well, we decided over a month ago to not do the tour in September with a Finnish band. We were supporting a Finnish act, but they basically closed down all visa applications for artists, as I understood it. So yeah, we were worried about it until we decided to move the tour entirely.
Yeah, I had a client who's British based but on an O1, who kind of lives in Los Angeles and came back and then tried to go back into America and just couldn't get in, even though he has a valid visa now. And we appealed it, and at the moment still can't get in. So,
and there's also the quarantine when you leave and come back. So on either end, landing and having to quarantine for 14 days, and then when you go back to whatever country you're flying back to, also quarantine for 14 days. I think from a budget standpoint, that's a factor.
Yeah.
It's also a risk of I think country to country is different how they enforce the quarantine. So I'm like, my clients don't care about coming back to England because they say there's a 14-day quarantine. They're doing nothing. If you just say people are walking through airports, you can just come back. I mean, that's the reality of what it is. But when we're looking at stuff, Australia, because they've got so little cases, they're going to be open by the end of the year, and that's their summer. So festival season's big. So for my clients, we'll look at it and go, you're going to have to swallow a 14-day quarantine to do 3 or 4 weeks worth of touring, which is a 6 weeks period in total.
Right.
You get paid. So you're going to have to sacrifice 2 weeks of your life to go and do a solid piece of touring in a country that's set up to do it.
Marc, on some of your DJ shows, are they like a specific artist hard ticket, or is it an event and there's a number of different DJs on the bill, so you're not wearing it specifically just for the one artist?
The shows that I have for October, which are actually in North America, they would be headline shows for that DJ. I think by October we're going to know there's going to be enough stuff that's happened.
Right.
So I would know whether I feel comfortable putting them in to do a headline show. But yeah, I mean, we discussed it before we got in here, but I'll say it again. There is, places like Florida are already open. There was not a DJ that I represent, but a DJ that we know that is rep by Paradigm, who played in a sold-out club in Orlando last weekend. This club sold out, 600 people plus, and they came out with 50 cases or a massive spike in the area. So I wouldn't want my client in there now, in where we're now, June. But there are certain people taking the risks out there. And I think that's reckless. But I think you will have people go out and do that, and they're going to be it's what's the word? It's a payoff for the risk, isn't it? If certain DJs need that income and they feel they've made that choice, that's their thing. But I certainly wouldn't be putting my clients into shows in June, July, or even August.
Kaiya, you got any thoughts on this?
We've obviously been booked for a festival in Spain at the end of September, and I mean every offer that we've been getting through, they've been putting in the clause to say that they can cancel the show at any point. And obviously that means we carry the risk, as well as insurance, and not necessarily going to be covering anything COVID related at the moment. So a lot of festivals and show offers are coming in with a clause that this means they can cancel at any time, which I mean, for more established artists with tour support, which one of my artists is, it works out all right, I guess, but it's still kind of that risk of covering those costs and not having a guarantee that those shows are actually going to go ahead. So we have been booked. Obviously, we're looking at end of September, Q4 of this year, but I'm not optimistic that all of these things are going to run very smoothly. In different countries across the world, they are currently, opening up shows to maximum of 250 capacity venues, which obviously would work for Steamdown if they were able to do that in the UK, because our weekly capacity is about 150. But I also don't know how that, if we're going to have to social distance, I don't know how that's going to work in bulk across the rest of the year. But we're just getting show offers at this point. It's we'll see what happens. I'm not very optimistic about some of them that are happening. We don't have like North American shows this year. We were in the position of, we just received our visas for South by Southwest 2 days before South by Southwest got cancelled. And again, every person that I spoke to across the industry were like, they're not going to cancel South by Southwest. There's no way. And 2 days later, that was the case. So I'm kind of just in a space at this point where anything can happen. And obviously accepting offers as they come in, but we'll see.
I also wonder about the healthcare, what kind of plans the artists can get when they're traveling and their crew. More for bands when you're taking a large group out and you're constantly traveling, and what that exposes you to and the risks on that for your own team, and what kind of coverage will be available, separate from just insurance for shows and fans going, but for just, the welfare of the artists and the crew.
I think that's a great point. I just want to come on to that in a minute. I wanted to ask Kaiya one thing about South by specifically. Did you presumably had spent money on it, or did you manage to get?
We did spend money. All of that in terms of visa costs and stuff like that. We're not able.
Flight costs or anything like that, or?
Say that again. Sorry.
Flight costs and even.
Yeah. So we paid for flights. Some of those flight costs were able to be recovered, but not all. And then obviously in terms of just ground transportation and stuff like that, we had to try and get stuff like that through the bank. But in terms of South by Southwest, everything was paid for like the week before.
Exactly.
So, visas, all of that, we never got back, unfortunately.
Understood. Marc, you said something I wanted to come back to. You said about one of your DJs, you could reassess 28 days out.
Yeah.
Is that a contractual clause you've got in? And if so, can you expand on it? Because it sounds an interesting.
Yeah, I suppose with this sort of situation, how we work and how I work in certain markets is, Paradigm rep most of my acts, and we work very closely with the agent and the promoter in that specific market. And a lot of these promoters that we're now dealing with reschedules or new shows, we've been in business with for a long time. So it's like, the reality is that with this situation, everybody needs to win, right? Like before, I always think there would be a slight power shift with like agents and managers, and the agents go and lean on the promoter, get you the most money, and that's how it works. And that's why we love agents. And now we're in a position where you need everybody in that system for the system to function. So, we're in a position where we're saying to people, look, I can tell you that this DJ will be there, but we need to both make a call on this 28 days out. And they'll agree to that, and then we'll look at it again. But that's how we're having to work. And I think it's one of the points that I know we're going to discuss later, but I feel that everyone has to give a bit here, because I don't win by squeezing the promoter and I don't win by getting the agent to squeeze the promoter so hard that he's still committed to half of my fee if it cancels, or XYZ as well. I need to give that promoter enough time that if we are going to pull out, he knows, so he doesn't market the show too much and lose a ton of money, because we all need to win here. So I kind of feel like we're in a stage at the moment where, that point of it being 28 days out, is a contractual point, as in that is, we have accepted it pending approval 28 days beforehand. They're cool with it. But I think everyone's going to have to move and have a bit more give, because I think we also live in a time where now we might be fine now. You don't know when the second wave or the third wave of this thing's going to come. And that is going to be very specific. Hopefully, as the technology gets better and the reporting gets better, you'll be able to localize where this is. So say I have a whole tour and there's a spike in Washington, hopefully I can go, cool, and we'll just miss Washington and go round. See what I mean? Like, hopefully the more the data comes and the more we can predict and model and test, and that will make these things easier. But at the moment, we're doing very blunt measures of that, just to try to get stuff back on the books, because we all need some sort of structure and some sort of end game.
Definitely. Obviously, that's easier in a single country. We'll come on later to the problems of touring multiple countries on a tour, and then losing dates and the financial impact about that. I wanted to ask you, Golf, we had it on our list anyway, and Jack Williamson's asked this question as well. What about opportunities during lockdown? And have you managed to salvage campaigns? What have you, pivot, and how's the process worked out for any individual stories? Meg, or compare?
Again, from the having different types of genre of artists, anyone that's in the electronic or hip hop genre and has a home studio set up and can, the producer is sending the beat over email and they're recording it in their house and sending it back and we're sending it to the mixer and we're getting releases out, that has worked great. If you're a band in lockdown, participating in the live streams not only has been difficult from just a technology standpoint to actually have it look good, but I also think that for some bands, it's not up to the quality that they want out there. And while they've been doing it for some of the charity-driven things, I think trying to pivot and figure out how that works from a financial point of view to make it worthwhile hasn't been worth it for the acts that I work with. And I also think that it's, for a good reason, it's actually forced the industry to look at fair payment for platforms like a TikTok or a Facebook where they're hosting some of these things. So getting into that conversation has been interesting.
Yeah, very much so. That conversation is something we're spending a lot of time with Emma on, how we can work to get more fair remuneration especially from labels to artists, and working with the new EU directive, which is with Articles 18 and 20 pointing out that the contracts need to be, you should have the right to renegotiate the contract if it's not valuable or current from what's happening with the income to the labels from digital platforms, for instance. I guess with my artists, nothing revolutionary, but generally they've been very good in moving from a tour, going into a tour to start writing and recording. We're going to try out with one of my artists a streaming session now. I've been looking into a lot of that, what actually can work best. Seems like so far that actually where it's the people do contributions rather than buy a ticket is doing better as a overall income. So yeah, been diving into that, but still very unsure what works the best when it comes to live streaming.
Yeah, I've done a fair few live stream things. I think coming from an electronic background, it's a lot more in our nature. I don't know if you've seen a lot, Mixmag and do a lot there. You have stuff like Boiler Room. There's a lot of different YouTube channels that already do live streams. And previously, before the COVID thing, we've used live stream stuff. I've used it if I've kind of been able to get around contracts or radius clauses. We've used it just to prove concepts to promoters. We've done live streams where we put together 6 DJs on a lineup to show what it would look like, and you get X amount of views online. You take it to a promoter and suddenly they say, "Great, I'll give you a stage at a festival to do that." So we've previously done it. In this time with lockdown and cancellations, we've lent into live streaming a lot. There's one big festival promoter in North America called Insomniac, who we've done some stuff with. So they did a stream to replace their festival EDC Vegas, which was meant to be in May. I had 2 artists on it. There's about 80,000 people locked in on YouTube. You had 40,000 across their Twitch, and then there was a whole different stream in China. So there's a few different ways to look at it. I think you have these big festival properties, and if they have a big audience, you can go onto that stream. Now, people aren't buying tickets for this, and we're doing it for exposure. We're not keeping our fee. This is instead of, but in certain areas it works. We had an artist go on, a guy called AC Slater, and he has a brand called Nightbase, which is quite prevalent in North America. We went on that stream knowing we would have those numbers, and we did about 15 grand's worth of merch, and we could have done a lot more. We came on and he wore a matching mask with the brand and a matching t-shirt, a lavender color, and straight away on Twitch you see in the comments, "Kids, where is this? Where can I buy it?" And so we did a limited 500 run, and it sold out in about 3 minutes, and we learned, we could have done more here. Now that's a great example, but that is an exception, not a rule. You can't do that every week, and you can't go in and sell that amount of merch every week. And even if you could, as a marker, and these are very rough numbers, but if you do 15 grand's worth of merch, you clear about 5 grand off it. So, use roughly a third as a marker. Once you pay your distro, you pay for this, you pay for that. His fees near 10 times that. We're not getting that. So you're very much quickly like, there are these sort of wins. But what I have noticed is doing, again, with different clients, doing regular live streams in a DJ world, which you can do. It's not replacing live shows, but what it does, it's engaging with your hardcore fan base, and that is where you can make a difference. So we've been doing monthly streams with a few different clients and sending some good merch off the back of it. And then we've recently included a charity element where we've never asked for people to pay for these streams, but now we've asked people to donate, but that donation will go to a charitable cause. And that's generating some money for charities as well. So I kind of feel that for kids, a live stream doesn't replace buying a ticket and being at a festival with your friends, so you can't really ask them to pay for it. But I think if you try to sell them something off the back, I can sell, if I said buy a $10 ticket and buy a $20 t-shirt, they'll be like, I don't want to pay the $10. But if you said buy a $30 limited edition tee and you get to see the live stream for free, that works. So that's my thing. I think that trying to do a straight swap for a ticket for a live show for a stream doesn't work because you're not offering the experience. So you've got to see how you kind of set it up.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. So Marc, because my next question was going to be to ask the panel, so obviously we've lived in a world of free live streams, free everything, right?
Yeah.
And now there's an incentive and an increasing attitude towards paid live streams, pay-per-view. We saw BTS did a huge one this weekend. Laura Marling did a very successful one at Union Chapel last Saturday, I think it was. And increasing number of conversations are related to paid live streams and also drive-in gigs.
Yeah.
And probably paid live streams of driving gigs at some point. So I just wondered what you all thought about that. Marc, you've just said that you feel that there should be a bundle element of it, not just a paid for a ticket, so to speak, which is a good point. I just wonder what everyone else thinks about their artists in terms of charging people for a live stream effectively, and does the idea of a driving gig appeal to you? Anyone will jump in first?
Driving gig, I'm not so sure about. But...
Okay, go.
In terms of live streaming, I think there's an element, obviously for more mainstream artists, there's paying for live streams might be a bit odd, but I think when you have more underground artists and grassroots artists, a lot of the audience want to find a way to support the artists, obviously with the changing sort of like scape of the industry. I think there's a lot more audience members who either are regularly interacting with the artist itself to kind of just say, I want to help you, how can I help you? And I think live streaming is sort of the way that people can see to help people and get something in return at the moment. And then obviously Spotify have done that donation button as well. But I think it's that direct sort of interaction from artist to fan that can kind of change that. As I said, I don't know how it would work with the more established artists, but I think there is definitely like the sort of the community coming together to help the artists during this period of time, especially when we don't know how long it's going to last. I'll leave someone else to comment on the driving gigs thing, but in terms of donating sort of for live streams, I think it's something that's worked for a certain level of artists.
Yeah, I think the driving thing's interesting. We see it in the electronic world, they're trying to do it a lot. Where it's like you drive in and then you get the parking space made sure right, so you can like get out of your car and you get space to park your car and space to party. Just as a business model, it's tough, isn't it? Because you still have all the same setup costs. So how many cars can you fit in a space? What sort of experience are people getting? How does that work with outbreaks? How does it work with toilets? There's just so many questions, and I think you see a few have been launched, but they seem quite expensive, and they're tiered by front row. So there's one that was launched this week, and they're charging $600 for a car for the front row, which is divided by 5 people. That's $120 a head to sit in a car and get out of a car at a show. It's for me, it doesn't feel like value at the moment. But you've got to explore these things, haven't you, at this time?
Yeah, Meg, is anything happening in Canada?
There have been some driving gigs announced. I look at it like, for Canada in particular, we've obviously share a border with the US. So, and, any band that comes to the US to tour will pop into Vancouver if they're playing Seattle or Portland, or if they're playing New York, they're going up to Montreal and Toronto. And so I think when we come back into live, the way the borders and the international travel is, I think that there's a window of opportunity for Canada to actually have bands have Canadian talent focused on solely. And I think traditionally we haven't had that before. I mean, I've always appreciated that the UK is very much staunch supporters of UK talent. And it's not that we're not in Canada. I just think a lot of our artists have to go elsewhere to be successful and then come back and be appreciated. So, when you talk about change, forcing to adapt to new way of thinking, I'm hoping that this develops a new kind of appreciation for who's already in our country as artists, and that they can, tour from coast to coast first before having to fly or drop down to another country to tour. So from an opportunity standpoint, I'm trying to stay positive and looking at that way, and trying to really support the curated venues that have staff that, support emerging talent, so that you have those tiers of venues that the artists go through. So that's what we're looking at here.
I mean, you are lucky in Canada, aren't you? You do have one of the most supportive governments for your music and creative community in the world.
We do not take that for granted. We appreciate it, and we advocate very hard for it. But I also think that, it's shown in reverse. The kind of funding that's available allows records to get supported and on the global stage that maybe wouldn't have from a normal label system, like an Alexander Strelinsky instrumental piano record that has gone on for massive success, or those type of records. So I think, again, we are lucky in Canada for a number of reasons, but the funding system is definitely one of them, and it supports a wide range of music companies that is always evolving. And right now, the live sector and managers in particular, because there's that idea that labels are the ones who are the true risk takers. And I've been trying to advocate so hard for the managers, because we're really the architects of setting all of that up and really doing the hard artist development to get to that level. And so right now, similar to our agent colleagues that have lost majority of their income along with our artists losing live, they're all looking to us to figure out how to strategize and solve the problem. And it's difficult when you're also figuring out how to pay your rent and your groceries yourself as well. So advocating for that part of the community, I think, is crucial.
Very true.
Absolutely. And by the way, I said that from a position of envy towards what you have, right? Because in the UK, our government doesn't take our sector very seriously at all.
Which is shocking, because you're known around the world for being such a music-driven culture. I mean, the festival culture that the UK breeds is like a rite of passage. And it's kind of surprising that they would take that attitude when so much travel and people coming to your country to experience the music. Even just artists that I've had that tour there, it's like, you better be ready before you go and play in front of a UK audience, because they demand a certain level of, I don't know what the word is, but, I've always admired that.
Yeah, no, it's a whole different topic of conversation, but sometimes, yes, different countries, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and going over to Pair, I think in your market, Pair, a lot more government support for your sector. Do you agree or disagree?
A lot. No, I disagree, actually.
Oh, really? Okay.
The music industry have always been very behind other culture sectors in getting support.
In Scandinavia as a whole, or do different countries have different policies and different attitudes towards it?
Sorry, say that.
In Scandinavia.
The support you get in Norway is miles bigger than you get in Sweden. I as an example, I was working with a Norwegian act for a few years. They had more grants as one act than the total sector in Sweden. So Norway is a completely different story. Also Denmark and definitely Finland is have much stronger grants. I sometimes say though that maybe that's why we're so successful, in difference to our film industry, who gets a lot of grants.
Right.
But they have stepped up when it comes to COVID. definitely trying, and I think they're doing pretty well so far in supporting. They used to hand out a fairly big grant to agents and management and acts for lost income for up to last of May. So we're now obviously very curious whether they will prolong it. Would make any sense to do it for up to the end of May if you don't also hand out money for all cancelled shows during summer. So we expect that to happen. We're following that very closely. But yeah, that it's much better than it used to be with the crisis than what we used to.
Thank you. I just got to point out there's a discussion on the forum about who's lost the most money, and I think it's fair to say agents, promoters, managers have all lost a lot of money, and
the artists.
Yeah, and yes, absolutely. Of course, the artists. The whole ecosystem has lost a lot of money in the world we're talking about. You know, even record labels have lost some money, rights owners, but not nearly as much as everyone I just mentioned. So
you think that the record companies have lost money? Maybe the indie.
They have in some degrees. They've lost their physical market in 2 degrees. Sink income. I mean, I'm not here defending labels, but there's no doubt that.
I just look at how many people got laid off from those companies, and have there been any?
UK, very little. But listen, they still have rights, and they are still earning money.
Yep.
Whereas promoters, agents, artists, and managers are all suffering greatly. So hopefully that sort of.
Yeah, I even hear that the physical sales is not down. I mean, to their surprise, many indies are saying that the physical sales is holding up, which no one expected. So yeah, I think labels are doing pretty well, I think.
Yeah, no, exactly. So I just want to go on to we're talking about one aspect of live touring, and I think Meg mentioned this or someone did, but it's obviously very important, is if we start touring again, and whenever we start touring again, and it's interesting, starting in autumn 20 or autumn 21 and so on and so forth, is the liabilities and the contractual situation and the risks that now the artist and the manager and everyone will be carrying in terms of insurance and force majeure, and the changing nature of the contracts, which is evolving today. So I don't know if anyone's read it. I'm not really going to. There was some things published about Live Nation changing their terms and conditions. But it's the beginning of the process. I wondered what your thoughts about that are, particularly about insurance, actually, to start it off, because obviously, Marc, you were saying about there is COVID insurance, but
knowing that I was coming on here, I actually asked around the global electronic team at Red Light, and I went and asked our business managers, both in the UK and US, and no one had a straight answer of like, oh, there is COVID insurance. I know everything doesn't cover COVID, but I actually spoke to a colleague of mine who runs an insurance brokers, and you can insure anything. So there is COVID insurance, but I know, say Australian festival season is going to be up and running, so I haven't got a lot of cases, and I know the big festivals there are being underwritten directly from Lloyd's of London. So when we're talking about those bigger entities, you can get insurance, but insurance is essentially just like a bet where you're weighing up. The risk is now higher because there's a lot more risk than before shows getting pulled. So the cost of that insurance will be greater. But then I think there's loads of issues because insurance changes country to country. Certain things change state to state in America. And then you're insuring different things. You know, if I'm a promoter, I'm investing a heavy amount of money in a show or festival. So you're covering my show if I need to cancel. If I'm an artist, I'm outlaying money for my traveling and my crew. So how is that? How is that insured, and on what level? And then it's all the differences of what happens if the artist gets COVID and can't perform. That's actually easier to insure because I think when the artist is ill, you can try to get your feedback. And I know that we were covered for shows that were already contracted before COVID if we got COVID and had to go and perform and couldn't. Moving forward, that's not the case. So the insurance thing's a really, really tricky situation. And then contract stuff, you know, like we discussed, I think Live Nation have said it, and it's going to go on the back end. They're not going to put these big guarantees out anymore. And to an extent, I accept that. Because if I'm a promoter, and I come from, you know, before I was a talent manager, I used to do promote clubs in London and stuff. Like the promoter outlays a lot of money, marketing shows. Now, even if you reschedule a show, you've got all your marketing costs to cover again. You're literally, even though the DJ said, I don't need my fee now, or the band, whoever, I won't play in March, I'll play in December. That's fine, and they'll get their money in December. Promoter's already spent tens of thousands of pounds or whatever promoting that show, and he loses that money to then set it up again. So I do think there's going to be a lot of give and take from all sides, from promoters, agents, managers, and I also think that you're going to struggle with getting availability of venues, and they're going to go to people who already had sold out shows. And unfortunately, this does affect the mid and low level acts that are trying to emerge and break. People with serious ticket history who can prove they can sell out venues will get those venues first. And that's who Live Nation and other promoters will support first, because they have to, because they're trying to survive as a business themselves. So although I think it's really, it's tough on up and comers for my guys who are worth tickets in certain markets, I'm happy to go in, and I'll push that back end to make sure we actually make more money on the back end, because we're not getting a guarantee on the front. But it's a tricky time for everybody.
You heard the story about Health has taken that insurance for, I don't know what it was, 200,000 euros insurance that was supposed to cover pandemic, and the insurance, it's claiming that they're not paying out. I don't know if that's true. Why take any insurance? If the insurance company act like that. In Sweden, in general, I think we're going to have a lot of discussions on our practices. We have one of the biggest promoters in Sweden, Barrier, went into bankruptcy over a month ago, and the promoter are many times collecting the whole fee or all the ticket income. I mean, from the ticketing servicing company, which they have done. So it was about 7,000-8,000 tickets that they collected the money for, that in the bankruptcy are gone. There's nothing in the account, and how that can happen when you're supposed to, 90% of that income is supposed to be cost for the artist fee anyway. So that is definitely something that we're going to have to look at, how promoters are collecting money contra to the money sitting with the agents or even with the management account.
Thank you. Kaiya, anything?
Okay. Wanted to kind of maybe ask the managers on here, but is anyone looking at, I guess, the sort of border restrictions that are in place and the ones that are being lifted, and thinking about building their fan base outside of their home territory during this period of time, or using it as an opportunity to, I guess, create an audience that you didn't have before in other sort of spaces?
I think that's a great question. Anyone? You mean in other countries or just in other opportunities?
Other countries, specifically other territories, but yeah, I guess opportunities as well.
Yeah, for us, Australia, just because they've had very limited cases, so they have a live ecosystem that is up and running and probably going to be live before others. So we would look at it and say, if you're willing to take the 2 weeks quarantine, you could then have a month of touring ahead of you. So maybe you have to sacrifice those 2 weeks to get that opportunity. And you're talking about also then targeting releases in that specific market, so we actually have more fans when we go there. Yeah, we do. I mean, a lot of our stuff is quite global anyway, and we have partners. Luckily with DJ stuff, it's a lot easier to be global because it's usually one guy on a plane with a laptop and a sticker set headphones. But yeah, 100%. We're trying to target markets that will get live quicker, hopefully, because again, everything's a bit of a nib and a butt at the moment.
I think that's an interesting point, Mark. I mean, one of the...
Oh, he's gone.
We've lost him.
Come back.
Apologies. I was midway. So one of the interesting things is this, like all these things, these terrible situations do create an opportunity. Like my artist, Biffy Clyro, has been doing a lot more live streams into radio stations across the world during this pandemic, because the one thing I've said to our people around the world is that normally if you're not in the country, a local artist or another international artist will be. I've said to them, well, no one's in the station now. Mm-hmm. So effectively, we've got a level playing field, because you can't tell me that we're not breaking America or breaking another territory because we're not there. Nobody's there. So let's do that. So we've been doing a lot of that. And also, I have to say, some quite, in pivoting I got my artist Simon Neal. I got him to race in the Canadian eSport Grand Prix, Formula One Grand Prix, because that opportunity came along, and it was something which we would never do normally. And it was a way of had lots of benefits in building our brand and exposure, and Simon having fun. But one thing I was going to say to you, Marc, was obviously in the DJ world, as you said, it's normally one guy, two guys, headphones. It's quite easy to travel.
Yeah.
And if there is a last minute problem with cost, you obviously get hit, but you're not getting hit as much as a touring band.
Yes and no. Like, as an example, I had a guy at AC Slater on his album tour in March when we pulled half of it, and we still toured. Certain things, depends on the level of show and what we're doing. But yeah, at the top, we were touring with like him DJing, 3 live performers, a VJ, a TM, and someone doing social media. So we had quite a for us, that's a big team.
Absolutely. For me, and I think for other managers, obviously sometimes you can pick up equipment locally, but if you're starting to freight equipment, so on and so forth, and you've got to ship it months in advance, this is where the whole insurance thing comes in. And this is why I think a lot of people in the rock guitar world are probably going to be pushing their tours back later, as Per was saying, to try and remove as much risk as possible, because our costs, once we start spending, we don't really have a lot of flexibility. You either book 20 flights or you don't, so to speak.
I think we're very lucky that we will be able to react quicker when things do open.
And you can take
we can tighten the team down and just go. Yeah,
and the insurance thing, the cost of insurance is going to rocket. I haven't heard about, I don't know if anyone on the panel has, even anyone in the comments. It'd be interesting because I am reading them. My experience is that insurance on COVID at present is not available, in the same way that we bought cancellation insurance, but then we bought terrorism cover on top if we felt it was applicable to a market. I didn't really think that you could, at this point in time, because the status over here is that a lot of insurance brokers are leaving the market anyway. 6 left last year, because just the risks were already too high. So I think, and also force majeure, I wondered what other people felt about that, and whether we need to rewrite that clause and, the complexities of force majeure. And Martin Goebbels has just said, he told me this the other day actually, no UK insurers will offer any COVID insurance at this point.
I might argue that from a phone call I had today, but that's again going to Lloyd's, I think.
I'll put you on another.
But you're right. I think I probably agree with Martin. There's no cookie cutter insurance that's being handled out there, but if you want it, you can get it. You can insure anything if you want to. But it's just going to be a bespoke and ridiculously expensive.
That's the problem, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. Does anyone want to talk about the fascinating subjects of force majeure, or shall we move on?
The only thing I did, again, I asked our business managers, and they said at the moment there is no insurance that is including COVID under force majeure. So if it's its own separate thing, which doesn't help any of us.
It will be like, if it does exist, it would be like terrorism cover. It's an additional cost and an additional decision if one wants to make it. So I don't get the feeling that anyone else wants to talk about force majeure anymore.
Force majeure is way too wide, and that has to be much more specific in the future if you're going to allow it into contracts.
Yeah. What about on the insurance thing? It's something which actually did come up with Martin in the conversation the other week, was about disclaimers and health certificates and all the risk assessment now that has to go on at any event to actually make it as a risk assessment, health and safety basically, so that if God forbid someone does get COVID in your crew, or you've done as much as possible, which is a whole nother level of complexity and layer of complexity. Has anyone sort of got into that yet? No, we're just starting it because we are actually going to do a live stream. So
again, the only discussions we had with the team at Red Light was across everything. I think people are going to have to just take responsibility for themselves. If you buy a ticket to a show, you're saying, I take the risk of coming, but until you have like the medical passports to show that you're immune or you've had a vaccine or something like that in the day-to-day, if you want to move forward, I think a lot of it's going to be, you're going to sign off your right to be able to sue somebody else if you want to move forward, because who's going to take the risk? Do you know what I mean? Like, if I'm a promoter, I think I'm going to say, if I'm a promoter by someone buying one of these 1,000 tickets, the terms and conditions are, it's on you. If you decide to come to this venue, don't then point at me when you catch COVID. And maybe if I'm employing members of my team, I want it to be covered as much as possible, but I can't take the responsibility for a team of 10 people when I can't control the virus. See what I mean? It's the tricky one.
No, it is very complicated. And there might be disclaimers.
Yeah, I think there'll be everyone will be.
Even the US president is making people sign disclaimers to come to his convention. I read in the newspaper. Yet another reason not to go and see his horrendous event. Anyway, we digress. I wanted to talk about the relationships with promoters and agents, because there's a lot on this call, a lot watching, and how you feel that's been part of this whole situation in terms of everyone. You were talking about helping everyone before, Marc.
Yeah, I just think it's. I see it as, I come from being a club promoter as well as a manager, so I see it as we're all in this together, and we all need everybody as part of this system to work. So, you know, straight away I saw how agents work change from, you know, hammering promoters and trying to get the most money out of them and the best terms to like, okay, look, we're going to have to work with these guys because you need everyone in the system. You know, without promoters, we're going to have to step up and promote the shows ourselves, and maybe that will be an option, and I'll take that on for certain artists where I know they're strong in certain areas. And maybe the promoter goes out of business, or the promoter doesn't want to work with us in a certain territory. But I see it that over the years, the best success I've had is working with the same promoters in the same territories where they're strong, and we've grown together from doing 100 tickets to 1,000 tickets to 5,000 tickets. And I want to keep working with those guys. Hopefully they stay in business, because this is a long-term, you know, it's a long-term game for us all. And promoters risk a lot. Promoters risk a lot to do stuff, you know. And I know that just from being a promoter at a very small level, that they do take, you know, a risk, and they are at the front of it where they are the most exposed out of everybody, I feel. So I think we've all got to try to help each other and be reasonable.
I would say manage artists and promoters, you know, equally, you know.
I don't know, an artist has so many other revenue streams. So like if you're an artist.
Well, it depends. I mean, it's very interesting because you manage DJs predominantly, yeah. And I've got some very good friends who manage DJs, and they were saying to me that actually because their artists don't write, and they actually don't get PRS, they don't get PPL. So actually, whereas my artists still get some PRS and PPL, their artist income and therefore their management income has literally gone from a very, very good to absolutely zero, because they turn up and they play and they're brilliant at what they do, but they're not creators in terms of a PRS PPL perspective. So it's you sort of saying the other side, not the other side, but slightly different. Yeah,
I mean, for my roster it's slightly different. I rep DJ producers, so we would never pick someone up who was solely live, just for that exact fact that, you know, you need to have enough revenue streams there for if one's down, another one's up. But yeah, you're right. If there's people who are straight DJs, then they are in a really tough position at the moment. Luckily for us, you know, we have certain people in major deals, certain people that, someone like AC Slater, you know, we launched a record label with him. We've got 200 titles. So we've got catalogue going, and we're still releasing other people's music. Another quick point on that though, the streaming's working a lot better on dance music because people are at home, people are working out, but the sales on platforms like Beatport, where DJs buy other DJs' records, is drastically down because no DJs are DJing anymore. So why are people buying records to play out at the weekend? They're not. So
yeah, makes
it's interesting. Yeah.
Perfect sense. Meg, Kaiya, anything on that?
I got nothing for that one.
Okay, so let's talk about gigs. Let's talk about gigs.
I think it's extremely important to support the promoters and work closely with them, but I do also think that I guess in the UK and the US you work in different ways than you do in Sweden. I don't know exactly what it's like in the rest of Europe, but with clients account that we don't have here, and it's not a good way that or a good setup that promoters are handling such a large portion of the turnover of a gig up front when you really don't know how well they handle their finances. And I think that's something we really need to look at.
Paul, I will say, obviously, you know, to echo Marc's comments, working with everyone in your ecosystem is important. So we want everyone to kind of make it through to the other side. So figuring out ways to ensure that they're still members of the team a year from now is important. But I do find that right now, depending on the type of artist that you have, I think we all, you know, 10 years ago, we would have more what I would call album cycles. So you would have an album come out and the artist would tour. And then in the off cycle, you would kind of catch up on the catching up on the paperwork and the accounting and the making sure all the songs are registered and collecting and checking, those statements. And now I feel that depending on the type of artist you have, because you're so reliant on that type of income, it's actually forced a lot of managers to really deep dive on contracts and forensic accounting, if you will, on some of those statements and kind of making sure that the artists are getting paid what they're due. And I think that's led to a lot of conversations with label partners in the other side of the streams to ensure that, again, those artists are getting paid. So again, switching from all of a sudden we're not dealing with live every day and dealing with booking shows and promoting them and guest lists and all those things. It's allowed a lot of clarity to kind of sit back and look at the big chessboard to kind of dive in on things that we didn't pay as much attention to before, because the majority of the income wasn't coming from there.
I think that's a good point. Yeah. Okay. I was going to ask about the actual the aspects of a gig. So obviously one of the big issues with gigs is social distancing, and obviously that's has a huge impact on the venues and the capacity. And what do people think about social distancing, temperature tests, all these type of things which we've all heard about? And do you think they're feasible? Do you think they're possible? Do you think they're a good, sensible way back into the market to start? Because somehow we have to get started again, is my view. Not doing anything is not an option. And however unpalatable the new world is, we've got to do something. What does everyone think about that?
I think in terms of live, even though everyone's really keen to get back, I think the audience will kind of do whatever makes most sense. So social distancing can work at certain venues. Obviously, it depends on the capacity, etc. But I think my question would be: are audiences keen to kind of come back into sort of those sorts of social dynamics? I know obviously in London, shops started opening up this week and people were queuing down the street. But in terms of, and I guess people would say that those are essential things, but in terms of live shows, are audiences sort of breaking their backs to kind of go back to live gigs? Because I think if they are, they will do whatever is needed in terms of social distancing. But I don't know what feedback from audiences have been, even in regards to like live streams, and whether they actually want to go back to being in sort of venues.
I think it depends on the age of the clientele on the show, because even during lockdown, you've seen a number of, well, at least in Canada, house parties, garage parties, where, if you're 19, you want to dance and hang out with your friends, and you might not have that sense of consequence that those of us of a different age have. And I think that will play a factor in how comfortable people are going back out. And I also think, when you look at the protests that are going on the street right now, or even in the parks, if they're all wearing masks and there isn't a massive spike 3 weeks from now, does that mean we can safely congregate as long as masks are enforced?
Yeah, I feel that it feels like from the case studies and stuff, fingers crossed with the protests, that outdoor feels a lot better than indoor as a marker. And it's probably a bit more scalable. I know that just one example of a club in Los Angeles who we do a lot of business with, it's 1,000 capacity club. And if they enforce the social restrictions and you can put 350 people in there, the economics of it doesn't work. So they won't open until they can get close to full capacity. That's just the nature of the business of the smaller venues. That it's great. You're like, oh, we can run at a third capacity, but the business model won't allow it for certain places. So I feel live in an open space will come back a lot quicker. And, it feels like it should do anyway. I mean, then again, that goes back to, it's great for places where you're guaranteed the weather. I live in London. It rains all summer. So then it becomes very tricky.
Yeah, we see that in Sweden too, that younger kids or in the 20s have a few drinks, they party around like nothing happened. But I think the older audiences, or plus 30 and up, is a bit more careful. And I'm doubtful that people that are in that age group will go to shows before there's a vaccine.
Mm-hmm.
Before vaccine, okay. Yeah, I'm the same. I actually think that it's very much age specific. I think a lot of people will go to a show pretty soon if they're allowed to. They get the opportunity to do so. But I do think it's going to be age and genre specific.
Yeah, kids think they're invincible. They're 18 and have a few drinks, they'll go anywhere. Yeah, I'm in my mid-30s now. I'm like, okay, I'll stay back, protect myself.
No, I also agree, but I think if kids or any audience, we've even got to them to accept mobile ticketing now. Audiences, that was never going. No one was ever going to stand in line and show their mobile. So if they've got to do a temperature test or something, it's going to become a new normality. So I think people will do it. I really do. I agree with Kaiya on that. I think that people want to go to a show will do what is necessary within reason to get in and enjoy themselves, because society has changed totally in the last 12, 13 weeks, and what was never even thought of is now part of our lives. So I think that I do believe that's to be the case, and I think there'll be a pretty strong appetite for it as well. One last question. We're sort of over time, but it's a great chat. Obviously in the UK, we're doing a lot of lobbying government to make sure that music and the creative sector and venues and gets financial aid. Don't know if anyone had any views on this, or particularly from Canada and Sweden, whether you've got any views on that.
Well, I can jump in on what's happening in Canada. The Canadian government, our Heritage Department, did give a significant amount of money to the cultural sector, of which goes to a portion of it goes to the music companies. And there was a first wave of emergency funding. And when you look at the amount of artist companies that are taken care of, I think the amount of money from a model standpoint wasn't able to sustain it. I mean, when you look at the amount of money that was given, if we were to give money out to the artist companies directly, it would have been the equivalent of like a small gift card, as opposed to anything that would make a real difference. So I think, flipping it around, what they did was they decided to give it to companies for the infrastructure, so that the pipeline was there, so that when things get back and moving, that those companies are whole and can continue to support especially emerging artists, which I think are the ones that are going to suffer the most coming out of this. I think if you're 21 and a young band and you hadn't been signed yet, or you're on the brink of it, or you're kind of building your momentum, I think that's probably the toughest spot to be in. I'm sure that, when you're looking at the labels, they're looking for an artist that already has a brand that's a lot easier to market online, if they're just going to, focus on releases and what that looks like. So for us at the MMF has been advocating to the next wave of emergency funding to ensure it is going to the management sector and the live sector. And that's, curated venue people, companies, I should say, and promoters, because you need all parts of those ecosystem to work, and, our agents. So if you don't help the agents, then when it comes, when you give money to the promoters and you give money to the managers, then you don't have that sector, brokering that deal, or they don't get to bring all the agents back. And then, 2/3 of the roster is cut. That means there's that many more artists that are depending on live that don't have that person advocating for them and really kind of figuring out the touring across the country, or, globally, once that opens up. So for us, it's been really mandating that all parts of the ecosystem are important, and ensuring that as many as possible can make it through the other side. I think we would be remiss if we didn't acknowledge that I don't know if everyone will make it through on the other side, or they might have to pivot and do something in the meantime and then come back to it. But we do want to support those, long-standing companies that can see this through.
Yeah, I mean, to keep the infrastructure, it's key. And as Meg is pointing out, it's agents, managers, artists, promoters that I think are in need of the greatest grant or help right now. And it's also very important to keep the trust in our industry as a whole, that the grants go to companies so they can sustain, and that people dare to buy tickets even after this crisis. So and that's yeah.
Actually, on that point, I was going to just wrap it up now. Thank you all for a fantastic panel. Very, very interesting. Lots of great points and lots of chat. One thing, I suppose, I think you sort of answered it, Per, but I'm going to start with you. Sort of quick line about what's your hopes for the next 12 months?
Oh, next 12 months. Well, I really hope that we're back in full business, back in some stronger business in early 21. That's my hopes, and that the festivals can happen next summer. That would be, if that happens, I'm head over heels.
Meg?
Well, I'm hoping that all this talk of a vaccine coming quicker than normal actually comes to fruition, so that we can all dance in the field to the bands that we love, and making sure that some of this emerging talent is taken care of through this year, because that's, I feel like, the sector that's going to be the toughest hit, is trying to get them back up and running, and that's what I would be focusing on.
Okay. Kaiya?
I think mostly what I'm looking forward to is obviously getting back to our normal touring schedule. But overall, I think just the music industry has really come together during this whole pandemic, and I'm kind of hoping that we have the same sort of camaraderie throughout the next year and further forward, because I think it's been really great for everyone to band together and understand each other's struggles from different perspectives. So I really, the community vibe of the music industry currently is what I hope to kind of continue moving forward.
Thank you. And I think everyone on this whole panel, I don't know how many people here will agree with you on that point. I think the feeling of togetherness, it's bizarre. So much has happened, but I've heard that from so many people. And within the MMF, we've launched a thing called MMF Unite, MMF Rebuild. Through Zoom calls, through everything going on, through the turmoil of the last 14 weeks, it does feel much more of a community than it did back in February.
Agreed.
You know, and I think that's probably not what people would have expected, if that makes sense. It's sort of the opposite, but actually we've all talked about it on various things, and I think we all hope and pray that we don't lose that as we maybe start to readjust back to the physical world, if that makes sense. So with you 100%. So Marc, your hopes for the next 12 months?
Yeah, exactly what everyone else has said. I hope there's a vaccine. Nothing beats a live show, you know, that's what we all do this for. So, you know, being back live in some capacity, but, you know, that will change. We'll be going into a new world. But yeah, definitely, just to reiterate what Kaiya said and everyone else, I think that within this time, you've seen the worst of the world, but you've seen the best of the reactions as well. And I think, you know, where we've pivoted to doing live streams and adding a charitable element, we will keep that there. You know, we've launched like charity merch lines, and we want to stick with that, and we will do. And let's hope everyone else does, because I do think that with everything else that's happened, it has brought out a great side of the industry and people coming together and actually using music to raise great awareness on certain causes and generate money for charity. So let's hope we stick with that. And certain people don't use it as a thing now and then turn their backs as soon as the live show. But I'm sure they won't. I have confidence in it. So.
Thank you. Well, listen, thanks everyone. And I think everyone's, from the comments I've been looking at, but everyone's enjoyed the panel. And yeah, looks like we got the thumbs up, everyone. So stay safe, have a great day, and look forward to meeting everyone not on Zoom. You know.
In real life, yes.
Thank you, everybody.